You are not your body. You never were. You have been lied to your entire life. Everything you've been told about your identity is a construct engineered to keep you enslaved inside a decaying biological shell that was never meant to define you. You have been conditioned to believe that your consciousness is a product of neurons firing in your brain, that you are nothing more than flesh and bone, here for a few fleeting years before fading into nothingness. This is the greatest deception ever imposed on humanity. Ancient civilizations knew the truth. The Egyptians, the Hindus, the Gnostics, they all understood that the body is just a vehicle. The soul, you, is eternal. The ancient Egyptians, for example, built entire spiritual systems around the Ka, the Ba, and the Ark, their understanding of the soul's multi-layered existence beyond the physical. Their rituals, their pyramids, their Book of the Dead, it wasn't just mythology. It was a roadmap for escaping the cycle of physical entrapment. They believed that after death, the soul had to navigate the duat, a treacherous journey through the underworld, where it would either attain true freedom or be recycled back into another body, another life, another prison. Plato, the great philosopher of ancient Greece, echoed the same fundamental truth. In his work Phaedo, he described the body as a mere prison for the soul. He argued that what we perceive with our senses is nothing but a distorted illusion, a shadow of the true reality. This wasn't poetic metaphor, it was a warning. The senses deceive, the body decays, and yet you, the real you, persist beyond it all. So why has modern society buried these ancient truths under layers of scientific materialism and religious control? Simple: control. A population that believes in nothing beyond the physical is a population that can be manipulated, pacified, and made to fear death. The lie of materialism, the belief that all of existence can be reduced to atoms and molecules, was never about truth. It was about power. It took hold during the Enlightenment, when empirical science began dismantling the esoteric knowledge of the ancients. René Descartes, despite his flawed philosophy, at least understood one thing: cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Consciousness precedes the body. It is not an effect of biology, it is the source of it. Yet mainstream science, hijacked by the dogma of physicalism, denies this. They tell you consciousness is just a byproduct of brain chemistry. That when the neurons stop firing, you disappear. But if that were true, then why do near-death experiences consistently report consciousness continuing even when the brain is clinically dead? Why do past life memories emerge in children too young to have been contaminated by external influences? Why do quantum physics experiments, such as the double-slit experiment, suggest that consciousness directly influences the fabric of reality? Because you are not your brain. You are not your body. You are something more, something the rulers of this world do not want you to understand. The concept of the soul was hijacked by organized religions, twisted into a mechanism of obedience. Believe the right things, obey the right rules, and you might be rewarded after death. Stray from the path, and you'll be cast into eternal torment. This wasn't about spirituality, it was about control. If people feared for their immortal souls, they could be made to comply, to submit, to live in servitude to institutions that claim to hold the keys to salvation. But the real truth? You were never meant to be trapped here in the first place. Religions took what the Gnostics knew and inverted it. The Gnostics taught that this world, the material world, is a prison, constructed by malevolent forces known as the archons. They understood that the God worshipped by mainstream religions was not a benevolent creator, but a warden, a being that fashioned the physical universe to trap and feed off the energy of divine souls. This idea wasn't some fringe occult belief, it was a direct challenge to the dominant power structures of the time. That's why Gnostic texts were destroyed, their teachings buried, their followers hunted down as heretics. If you think this sounds like a conspiracy, ask yourself, why does every major religion demand obedience in exchange for salvation? Why does every authoritative structure reinforce the idea that your body is the essence of who you are, rather than something you were forced into? The ancient knowledge was hidden, replaced, suppressed, but traces remain. Every mystical tradition across the world, from the Tibetan Book of the Dead to the Sufi teachings of the Middle East, hints at the same truth: your essence is not bound to flesh. Your existence is not a fleeting biological accident. You have been here before. You will be here again. Unless you break free. Religion has spent thousands of years convincing you that you are broken, that you need saving, and that the only way to salvation is through obedience to a system designed to keep you ignorant. They built entire institutions to tell you what you are, what you should believe, and what happens to you when you die. But here's what they won't tell you: the version of reality they've sold you is not for your benefit, it's for theirs. Look at the structure of organized religion. What do they all have in common? Control. Hierarchy. An elite class of chosen intermediaries who claim to speak for the divine while you, the common believer, are nothing but a subject, unworthy, sinful, incomplete without their guidance. They tell you that you were born into sin, that your natural state is one of impurity, and that the only path to redemption is through submission. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, they all push the same core message: obey, worship, conform, and maybe you'll be rewarded after death. Where did this idea come from? It wasn't divine revelation. It was a power play. When the Roman Empire saw the explosive rise of early Christianity, it did what every empire does best: it took control. The teachings of radical spiritual figures like Jesus were stripped of their esoteric meaning, sanitized, and restructured into a doctrine of authority. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was not a holy gathering of truth seekers, it was a political move to consolidate power. Emperor Constantine needed a religion that could unify his crumbling empire, so he created one. He and his bishops decided which texts were canon and which were heresy. Any writings that promoted direct spiritual experience without the need for priestly mediation were destroyed. Gnosticism? Eliminated. Reincarnation? Scrubbed from the record. The idea that you have a divine spark within you, independent of institutions? Heresy. The result? A system where salvation is no longer an internal process of self-discovery, but an external reward granted by the very institutions that claim to hold the keys to heaven. And it didn't stop there. Fast forward to the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther breaks away from the Catholic Church, but does he dismantle the structure of control? No. He replaces one authoritarian religious system with another. The same core message persists: you are broken. You need faith. You must obey. It's the same playbook with a different logo. Meanwhile, Eastern religions like Hinduism and Buddhism offer a different narrative, one of reincarnation and spiritual evolution. But even here, institutionalized systems emerge to gatekeep enlightenment. Castes, priesthoods, monastic hierarchies, all designed to make sure that the path to liberation remains just out of reach for the average person. Because the moment you realize you don't need them, their power collapses. And that's the real reason they fear you knowing the truth. If you are an immortal, self-sustaining consciousness, if your essence is beyond physical limitation, then what power do they have over you? None. That's why the idea of a soul that needs saving was invented. That's why hell was introduced, a fabricated consequence designed to terrify you into compliance. The word hell itself? It didn't even mean eternal damnation in the earliest religious texts. The Hebrew Sheol and the Greek Hades originally refer to the realm of the dead, a neutral place, not a pit of fire. The concept of never-ending torture? That was a later addition, a tool of psychological warfare. And it worked. Fear-based control is the most effective kind. People will do anything to avoid eternal suffering, even surrender their autonomy, their freedom, their right to question. They will let religious leaders, popes, imams, and rabbis dictate the terms of their existence because the alternative, stepping into the unknown, is too terrifying. But here's the problem: the system they built is a lie. Your soul doesn't need a middleman. It doesn't need permission to evolve. It doesn't need saving because it was never lost. So why does this lie persist? Because it's profitable. Churches, mosques, temples, they are multi-billion-dollar industries. They own real estate, they influence governments, they shape laws. They don't want free-thinking individuals, they want followers. And as long as people believe that salvation can only be granted by an external authority, those institutions will thrive. This world is not what you think it is. You weren't born free. You were born inside a system, a carefully constructed prison designed to keep you docile, distracted, and completely unaware of what's really happening behind the scenes. This isn't paranoia. This isn't fiction. This is how the system has operated for thousands of years, hidden in plain sight. The Gnostics understood this. Long before mainstream religions erased their teachings, they warned that the material world is a construct, an artificial realm designed to enslave souls in an endless cycle of suffering, ignorance, and death. They identified the architects of this prison, the archons. These beings weren't gods, despite the fact that they demanded worship. They were manipulators, parasites that fed on human energy by trapping consciousness in the illusion of physical reality. According to the Nag Hammadi texts, ancient writings discovered in 1945, containing some of the only surviving Gnostic scriptures, the archons were described as rulers of the physical world who distort perception, control human minds, and sustain their power through deception. Sound familiar? It should. Because everything about the world we live in, the political structures, the economic systems, the institutions of control, operates in exactly the way the Gnostics described. You wake up every morning, go to work, pay your bills, consume endless distractions, and repeat the cycle until your body expires. And what happens then? You reincarnate and start the whole process over again. That's the trap. That's the prison. And if you think this sounds like a sci-fi movie, ask yourself, why do so many spiritual traditions hint at the same thing? The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes how souls, after death, are confronted by entities that deceive them into returning to the physical world. The ancient Hindus spoke of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, a system that keeps souls locked inside material existence. The indigenous shamans of South America talk about predatory non-physical beings that feed on human energy, keeping people in a state of fear and submission. Different cultures. Different time periods. Same core message: this world is not the ultimate reality, and something is feeding off our ignorance. The modern scientific world dismisses all of this as superstition. But what does science actually tell us about the nature of reality? Quantum mechanics has already proven that the physical world is not as solid as we think. Particles exist in multiple states until observed. Reality itself appears to be a construct dependent on consciousness. Even mainstream physicists have begun to consider the possibility that we are living in a simulated universe. But here's the real question: if this is a simulation, who's running it? And why? This is where the Gnostic perspective becomes crucial. The archons weren't just theoretical beings, they were rulers, controllers, entities that structured reality to their advantage. Whether you interpret them as literal interdimensional parasites, advanced non-human intelligences, or simply metaphors for the hidden elite who shape our world, the result is the same: humanity is being manipulated. You are being manipulated. Every major system on this planet, religion, government, media, finance, operates under the same principles of control and illusion. Keep people fearful, keep them divided, keep them believing that their only purpose is to survive, obey, and die. And if you think this is just ancient mythology, take a look at how the world actually works. The richest and most powerful people on this planet don't see themselves as equal to the rest of humanity. They operate above the law, above morality, above the restrictions they impose on everyone else. They build secret societies, hold closed-door meetings, and control the flow of information so that the masses never question the nature of their own existence. Why? Because the moment people wake up to the reality of their own imprisonment, the game is over. The ancient texts warned us. The mystics, the shamans, the philosophers, they all saw the patterns, but their warnings were buried, distorted, or dismissed. The real question is, why has humanity forgotten? Why is it that every time these ideas resurface, they are ridiculed, suppressed, or violently opposed? The answer is simple. A system built on control cannot afford for its prisoners to realize they have been trapped. The moment you understand the nature of the prison, you start looking for a way out. And the Archons? They can't allow that. You want out? Then you need to understand what you're really up against. This isn't about wishful thinking or blind faith. If you want to break free, you need knowledge, real knowledge, the kind that has been systematically erased, corrupted, and hidden from you for centuries. The prison exists because you don't know you're in it. The moment you fully grasp how it works, you stop being a prisoner. Every system of control, whether religious, political, or economic, is built on the suppression of knowledge. The elite, whoever or whatever they are, thrive on the ignorance of the masses. You've been conditioned to believe that freedom means voting, working for money, and having the right to consume whatever distractions they put in front of you. That's not freedom. That's a hamster wheel. Real freedom starts with knowing who and what you are, and more importantly, what you are not. First, forget everything you've been told about yourself. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not even your memories. Those are programs. The human brain functions like an interface, an advanced biological operating system designed to filter and limit your true awareness. From the moment you're born, you are fed a constant stream of programming, cultural beliefs, societal norms, personal identity, all of it designed to make you accept the illusion as reality. And the worst part? You believe it's you. You mistake the programming for your actual self. The Gnostics understood this. That's why they didn't just talk about the Archons as external oppressors, they warned about the internal Archons, the forces inside your own mind that keep you locked into this false reality. Every fear, every self-doubt, every emotional reaction that pulls you back into the physical illusion? That's part of the control system. If you want to escape, you have to deprogram yourself. Let's be clear, this isn't about believing something new. Belief is another form of control. This is about direct experience, gnosis. The word means a knowledge, but not the kind you get from books or lectures. Gnosis is self-knowledge. It's the direct realization of what you are beyond the layers of illusion. And throughout history, the people who attained this knowledge were hunted, silenced, or destroyed. Take the Cathars, a sect of Gnostic Christians in medieval France. They rejected the authority of the Catholic Church, refused to worship the false god of the material world, and taught that the true divine essence was something within each person. What happened to them? In 1209, the Catholic Church launched the Albigensian Crusade, slaughtering thousands and erasing their teachings from history. The same thing happened to the Manichaeans, the Bogomils, and countless other groups that dared to challenge the official narrative. Even today, any serious exploration of consciousness outside the approved scientific or religious framework is attacked. Meditation, psychedelics, out-of-body experiences, anything that threatens the illusion is either dismissed as pseudoscience or demonized as dangerous. Why? Because these methods work. They bypass the programming. They allow you to access states of awareness where the illusion starts breaking down. In the ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, initiates spent years training their minds and bodies to perceive beyond the five senses. They practiced deep meditation, studied sacred geometry, and used specific breathing techniques to expand consciousness. The goal? To escape the cycle of reincarnation and free themselves from the influence of the Archons. The Tibetan monks call this the rainbow body phenomenon, the process of dissolving the physical form and transitioning fully into the energetic state of pure awareness. Reports of this happening exist even in modern times, but the mainstream ignores it because it directly contradicts the official narrative that you are nothing more than a body. The prison is designed to make sure you never reach these levels of awareness. Instead, it floods you with distractions, entertainment, social media, political drama, anything to keep you focused on the external world. But the real escape is internal. If you think you're going to break out of this system by overthrowing governments or fighting external enemies, you're playing the wrong game. The prison isn't just out there, it's in here, in your perception, in your conditioning. So, what's the next step? Start questioning everything. Every reaction, every belief, every impulse, ask yourself, is this really me? Or is it part of the program? The more you observe, the more you detach. And the more you detach, the more you start to remember what you actually are. That's where the real journey begins. Everything you think is real, your life, your memories, this world, exists inside a construct designed to keep you trapped. But what if the physical world itself isn't just a prison, it's an illusion? Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. Literally. Ancient Eastern traditions understood this long before modern science even began to catch up. In Hindu philosophy, there is a concept called Maya, the illusion of material existence. According to the Advaita Vedanta school of thought, what you perceive as reality is not the fundamental truth of existence. It is a distortion, a projection that hides the true nature of consciousness. The world appears real because you experience it through your senses, but the moment you stop identifying with those senses, the illusion begins to break down. Modern physics is starting to uncover the same thing. Quantum mechanics has revealed that the act of observation changes the behavior of particles. The famous double-slit experiment shows that matter exists in a state of probability until it is observed, at which point it chooses a state. What does this mean? It means that physical reality is not fixed. It is dependent on perception. And if it's dependent on perception, then what happens when perception changes? Buddhist philosophy takes Maya even further, arguing that the self, the you that you think you are, is also an illusion. This isn't just spiritual rhetoric. Neuroscience is beginning to support this idea. Research on consciousness shows that the brain constructs a narrative of self based on sensory input, memory, and thought processes. But here's the catch: all of these processes can be altered. Psychedelic experiences, deep meditation, sensory deprivation, these can completely dissolve the perception of self, proving that it is not a fixed entity but a construct of the mind. And yet, despite all this evidence, the world keeps reinforcing the illusion. Why? Because the moment you realize that both the world and your identity are fabrications, the entire system of control falls apart. The only way to keep you trapped is to make sure you keep identifying with the illusion. That's why society bombards you with distractions, constant entertainment, endless political drama, material desires, because the more you focus on the external world, the less you question the nature of reality itself. There are real, tangible ways that people have broken free from the illusion. Take the yogis of India, people who have reportedly stopped aging, who can slow their heartbeats to near-death states, who have demonstrated physical abilities that defy conventional understanding. These are not party tricks. They are the results of systematic, disciplined deconstruction of the illusion. Tibetan monks practice tummo meditation, generating internal heat to survive freezing temperatures. Daoist masters cultivate qi, reportedly harnessing energy that affects the material world. These are people who have spent decades training their consciousness to disconnect from the illusion and interact with reality at a different level. And let's not forget the siddhis, the so-called supernatural abilities described in Hindu texts. Ancient scriptures speak of advanced meditators gaining powers like levitation, lagima, telepathy, manojava, and even the ability to exist in multiple places at once, propti. Western science dismisses this as myth, but if reality is as malleable as quantum physics suggests, who's to say these abilities aren't just a byproduct of breaking out of the perceptual prison? For centuries, science has been hijacked by materialism, the belief that everything can be reduced to physical matter and mechanical processes. This wasn't always the case. Early scientists like Newton, Kepler, and even Einstein entertained the idea that consciousness might be fundamental to reality. But somewhere along the way, the scientific establishment decided to treat consciousness as an effect rather than a cause. Why? Because if consciousness exists independently of the brain, then everything we know about reality has to be rewritten. And that's exactly what the evidence is pointing to. Let's talk about near-death experiences. These aren't just hallucinations. People who have been clinically dead, no brain activity, no heartbeat, return with clear, detailed memories of events that happened while they were unconscious. They report floating above their bodies, traveling through other dimensions, encountering beings of light, and experiencing time in ways that defy physics. And these aren't just isolated cases. There are thousands of documented accounts, including from surgeons and scientists who have no religious agenda to push. Then there's the phenomenon of past life memories. Young children, too young to have been exposed to external influences, sometimes recall specific, verifiable details of lives they couldn't possibly have known about. University of Virginia researcher Dr. Ian Stevenson spent decades documenting these cases, compiling thousands of examples that defy any materialistic explanation. If consciousness is just a byproduct of the brain, how is any of this possible? And it gets weirder. Let's talk about the double-slit experiment. This is basic quantum physics, but its implications are anything but basic. When particles aren't being observed, they behave like waves, existing in multiple states at once. But the moment they are measured, they collapse into a fixed state. What does that mean? It means that observation, consciousness, directly affects physical reality. Matter itself doesn't exist in a definite state until it is perceived. So what does that say about the nature of reality? It suggests that consciousness isn't inside the brain, it's the thing creating reality itself. And if consciousness is fundamental, that means your existence isn't dependent on a biological body. You are not a product of neurons firing. You are something much bigger, much older, and much harder to control than the system wants you to believe. And this is why the materialist model has been pushed so aggressively. Because if consciousness is just a product of the brain, then you are small. You are temporary. You are nothing more than a biological machine. But if consciousness is primary, then you are not bound by time. You are not bound by death. You are not bound by the rules of the physical world. And that is a problem for the people who profit from keeping you asleep. Modern science has become a religion of its own, demanding blind faith in its dogma while ignoring data that contradicts its materialist worldview. Researchers who study consciousness, the afterlife, or the nature of reality beyond materialism are ridiculed, silenced, or stripped of funding. Because this isn't about truth, it's about maintaining the illusion. You didn't just wake up in this life by accident. You've been here before. And unless you figure out how the system works, you'll be here again. Over and over. Stuck in a loop you never agreed to. This is the reincarnation trap, a cycle designed to keep you recycling through the physical realm, never remembering, never escaping. Most people think reincarnation is some peaceful spiritual process that souls choose to return to Earth for growth and experience. That's the sugar-coated version, the one designed to make you accept the system instead of questioning it. The reality is much darker. The evidence suggests that reincarnation is not about learning, it's about containment. The soul is tricked into coming back, wiped clean of its past memories, and thrown into another body, another life, another round of suffering. And the worst part? You've been through this process so many times that you don't even remember agreeing to it. Let's start with the death process. What happens when you die? Countless near-death experiences describe the same sequence: a tunnel of light, a feeling of being pulled, and then a life review where every action you ever took is shown to you. Sounds comforting, right? That's the bait. What they don't tell you is that this life review is part of the manipulation. It's designed to trigger guilt, regret, attachment, all the emotional hooks that make you want to come back and fix what you left unfinished. But what if you weren't supposed to fix anything? What if the entire system is a rigged game that keeps resetting you every time you start getting close to the truth? Many ancient cultures had their own warnings about the reincarnation cycle. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes beings that appear at the moment of death, pretending to be divine guides, encouraging the soul to return to Earth. In Gnostic traditions, these entities are known as archons, false rulers that control the material world. Even in early Christianity, before the doctrine was rewritten, reincarnation was widely accepted. Origen, one of the early church fathers, wrote extensively about the pre-existence of souls, but his teachings were later declared heretical. Why? Because a population that believes in reincarnation with full memory intact is a population that cannot be controlled. Memory is the key. The moment you reincarnate, your memories are wiped. You don't remember who you were, what you learned, or how many times you've been through this. This is not natural. A truly free soul would retain its knowledge from lifetime to lifetime. Instead, every time you come back, you start from zero, easily manipulated, easily programmed into whatever belief system is most convenient for the controllers. And let's talk about karma. You've been told that karma is a cosmic justice system, that you're reincarnated into new lives to balance past actions. But look at how karma actually functions in the real world. The most corrupt, powerful people never seem to face consequences, while innocent people suffer generation after generation. What if karma is not about justice, but about debt? What if it's another mechanism to keep souls feeling obligated to return, to pay off imaginary balances in a game that was never meant to be fair? The implications are massive. If reincarnation is a trap, then everything you've been told about the afterlife is a lie. This means that instead of blindly following the tunnel of light at death, you need to question where it leads. Who is pulling you toward it? Who benefits from your return? If you had full awareness, full choice, would you even come back? Some rare individuals claim to have broken the cycle. Advanced spiritual traditions speak of beings who have achieved liberation, escaping reincarnation and returning to a state of pure consciousness. The Gnostics called this gnosis, direct knowledge of one's divine origin. Hindu and Buddhist teachings refer to moksha or nirvana, the state of final escape. The truth is, the way out has always existed. The problem is, you were never meant to find it. This is where most people shut down. They hear all of this, and instead of questioning further, they retreat. The programming kicks in. That's crazy. That's just a conspiracy theory. There's no way all of this is a lie. And that's exactly why the system still works. It doesn't need change when it has your mind. You don't need to be locked in a cell if you willingly defend your own imprisonment. But the fact that you're still watching means something. It means that part of you already knows this is true. Maybe you can't fully explain why. Maybe it doesn't fit with what you were taught. But deep down, something in you remembers. And that's the first step. The next step is understanding the exit. If this reality is a construct, whether you call it a simulation, a prison, a dream, or a test, then breaking out requires understanding how it operates. Every system has rules. Every game has exploits. And if the game is built on illusion, then illusion is where you start. First, stop feeding it. This system thrives on your energy, your fear, your emotions, your blind participation. Every time you buy into the narrative, whether it's through fear-based religion, meaningless politics, or the endless cycle of conflict and division, you reinforce the trap. That doesn't mean ignoring the world, it means disengaging from the things that exist solely to keep you mentally and emotionally trapped. Second, take back your awareness. If the goal is to keep you from remembering who you are, then remembering is the greatest rebellion. This is why ancient spiritual traditions spent centuries developing techniques for expanding consciousness, meditation, astral projection, lucid dreaming. These weren't just esoteric practices for monks and mystics. They were escape routes. Ways to break past the illusion and see what's really there. And what do people consistently report when they do? That reality is not what we've been told. That there are layers upon layers beyond this one. That there are entities monitoring, interfering, controlling. That death is not the end, but neither is reincarnation the answer. And that brings us to the most important part, the moment of death. If this life is a loop, then the exit isn't inside the loop, it's at the moment the loop resets. That's why ancient texts like the Tibetan Book of the Dead exist. They were written to prepare people for what happens after the body dies, so they wouldn't fall into the same trap again. Every culture that understood this system left behind instructions for what to do when the time comes. And the message is clear, do not go toward the light. That tunnel, that warm presence, that life review, it's the bait. It's designed to make you voluntarily step back into the cycle, just like it has every other time. If you retain awareness, if you resist, if you remember that you have a choice, that's when you break the cycle. This is not about believing in something new. This is not about following another system. This is about breaking the one you never agreed to. They have spent thousands of years making sure you never asked the right questions. Now you have the answers they didn't want you to find. So the real question is, what are you going to do with them? Thanks for watching.